Is there a hell in Middle-earth? The simple answer to this is yes, there is. But the more complex answer is, well, there are actually three different hells, and they're all kind of different. First, you have to ask yourself, what do you consider hell? If we think about the concept, it's actually pretty complex when we take into account all the different religions of the world. But let's try to figure out what are some of the most common attributes for hell. First, hell could be where bad people go in the afterlife. Or second, hell might just be where people are punished in the afterlife. When we think about hell in our own world and how the major religions of the world conceive of it, we often think of it as a place where people are forced to pay for their transgressions or their sins. Third, hell could also just be the famous place that the devil calls his home. Now, if we think about these three different interpretations of hell, we'll find that they're all found in a few different places in Tolkien's universe. If we start with the most common one, we can find it in a particular part of the kingdom of Valinor. And Valinor is the land of the earthly gods. It's the place that Frodo and Gandalf travel to at the end of the Third Age, and it's also where all spirits go after they die. In Valinor, there is a special place called the Halls of Mondos. This is also known as the waiting place by mortal men. After death, when the spirits of beings are released from their bodies, they experience a strong calling to travel to Valinor. This is called the Summons of Mondos, and you can basically think of it like the white light at the end of a tunnel. It draws the dead to their final resting place. In Tolkien's world, men are unable to ignore this summons, so they're dragged straight to the Halls of Mondos without condition and without pause. They wait there for a bit and then they continue on their adventure, and they go to a final resting place which no one actually knows about. It's theorized that they go beyond space and time to the very place that Gandalf went when he died, perhaps to the Hall of the Creator of the Universe, but we can't really say that for sure. And when we look at elves, you can see that they actually have a choice. They can ignore the summons of Mondos and wander Middle-earth as ghosts, or they can just answer it. And when they come to the Halls of Mondos, they will wait a while, and eventually they might receive a chance to get a new body. In their new body, they're allowed to travel in the gods' kingdom of Valinor, but they're actually not allowed to go back to Middle-earth to meet their friends and be with their family, who still are alive. Now, since both good and bad men receive the summons of Mondos, then we can sorta say this is a type of hell. Basically just on a technicality, because it's the home for bad spirits in the afterlife, at least partially. It doesn't fit in well with the Christian concept of hell, and it's not really supposed to, I guess. Obviously, the Halls of Mondos are more greatly inspired by Hades or the Hell of the Norse gods. And when we go to the second type of hell that you might imagine, the place where bad people are punished, the story gets a bit more complicated because the Halls of Mondos is ruled by a god with the same name, Mondos, and he has the power to pronounce the fate and the dooms of individuals, but that doesn't usually include punishments for people's crimes during their life. You really wouldn't find torture devices and a bunch of little demons in Mondos' realm. Little guys laughing as they inflicted pain on murderers or tax evaders until the end of time. At best, when you go there looking for some type of punishment, you might find an elf soul mumbling to themselves about their past life, wondering what they could have done differently. For the type of punishment that you imagine when you think of a Christian hell, the best we can find is the various kingdoms of Melkor. Because most importantly, Melkor is basically a fallen angel. He was the most powerful of the Ainur, one of the ancient angelic gods in Tolkien's world. And when Melkor descended to Earth, he decided to do everything he could to corrupt and destroy Eru's vision for existence. And that included collecting spirits, torturing them, and perhaps using them for his own creations. And since the spirits he collected were usually dark elves, which were considered unworthy of Valinor by their very nature, then we can think of them as being bad, and their entrapment by Melkor is sorta their punishment in the afterlife. It's not very clear and simple like the modern concept of hell, because in Tolkien's world, bad people don't die, and then are rejected at Heaven's Gate, and then, fall into a fiery pit. As we said earlier, all beings receive the summons of Mondos, which takes them to basically a pagan idea of an afterlife, and only elves are able to really reject it. So if an elf rejects the call, they're basically saying no to the natural order of things, and since in the early ages of the Earth, Melkor's home was under Middle-earth, the elves who decided to stay behind as ghosts would eventually become attracted to Melkor's calling, It was kind of a double-edged sword for the elves. If they denied the summons of Mondos and tried to avoid going to Valinor, they would become even more susceptible to the evil summonings of Melkor. Melkor himself was the highest ranking god or angel originally. He was the highest ranking Valar, as they were known in the text. He was a member of the original Ainur, who were themselves created by the supreme creator Eru Ilúvatar. As such, Melkor was given power to sculpt everything in the world. The only thing he couldn't do was grant true life to creatures, as that was saved for the supreme god. But if he could manage to capture the immortal spirits of elves and other beings, for example the elves who rejected the summons of Mondos, then he could use them to fuel his own creations. We know without a doubt that Melkor gathered the souls of elves. That was something that Tolkien said in the Silmarillion, and we know that he used them for some sort of necromancy, but we can't be sure exactly what they were put into. Tolkien himself went back and forth with the idea that Melkor used the elves and perhaps their souls to create orcs and trolls and his other creatures. Whenever we think about the third version of Hell and Middle-earth, we just have to look at whatever Melkor was calling his home at the time, because Melkor is basically a stand-in for Lucifer. His very first fortress, known as Utumno, was deep under Middle-earth. He carved it from the land when the Valar gods were sleeping after finishing the sculpting of the world. Melkor ruled here in the dungeon of Utumno, alongside other powerful gods that took on frightening forms, among whom were the Balrogs. So when we imagine hell in Tolkien's world, we can see that Utumno and Middle-earth really fits the bill. You could just have your being similar to Lucifer ruling a giant underground fortress, along with a bunch of terrifying demons, and they collected a bunch of elf souls. But besides the other earthly dwellings of Melkor, there's one more place in Tolkien's universe that you could consider hell, and that's the Void, because this is the final resting place of Melkor. And as he is the Lucifer-like figure of Arda, then wherever he lives must be a type of hell. The Void actually existed before the universe. It was a great nothing that Melkor used to travel into when he searched for the answers and the power to create life. After his final battle with the Valar gods, they cast him out of the world, and he went into the Void, and it's actually the place that he'll stay until the final battle for all of existence, when he's destined to come back to wage another war against the Valar one last time. The only thing we know about the Void is that it's a big black nothingness, and only Melkor and perhaps Sauron live there after being defeated. Also, there might actually be two Voids because it's kind of confusing. While Void originally referred to the big nothingness that existed alongside the timeless halls during the period before the universe existed, it's actually picked up one more meaning, and one of those meanings is just big empty parts of the known physical universe. That means one of these voids exists inside the physical realm, but is actually just a really far, black, desolate spot in the universe, and the other one exists outside of existence, or perhaps in another dimension. In any case, you can think of the Void, along with Utumno, as another type of hell in Tolkien's world.